Could this wooden toy in the hands of the elderly man you see in this photograph have dried the tears in the eyes of thousands of children? What if I told you that this carpenter has been hiding a tragic secret that no one knew about behind the toys he secretly made for children who lost their fathers in the war? If you have similar family stories, send them to the email address in the description, and let's keep these memories alive together.
This story takes place in the cold winter months of 1943 in a small town called Millfield in Ohio. On the snow-covered streets, the smoke rising from the chimneys of wooden houses showed that life continued despite the hardships of the war years. In the basement of one of these houses, when you went down the creaking wooden stairs, there was a small workshop where you could find saws, the smell of planed wood, and toys shaped by old hands with years of experience. The owner of the workshop was 63-year-old Samuel Thompson. Samuel was a tall man with sunken shoulders and thick glasses. His hair had turned completely white, and his hands were full of calluses from years of working with wood. There was a deep sadness in his eyes, as if he was searching for something he had lost in the past every time he looked. The deep lines on Samuel's face were traces not only of age, but also of the pain he carried within. On this winter evening, Samuel was working in his workshop as always. He had a small wooden horse in his hand and was carefully planing it. The horse's mane, tail, and even small horseshoes were perfectly crafted. Every toy Samuel made looked as if it were truly alive. On the shelves of the workshop, dozens of toys were lined up: wooden trains, dolls, balls, small cars, and countless animal figures. Samuel was not making these toys to sell. On the contrary, they were being prepared for a very special purpose. In the town, there were 14 children who had lost their fathers due to the war. Samuel knew each of these children's names, ages, and favorite toy types, because he was secretly following all of them. The first child was 7-year-old Tommy Mitchell. Tommy had stopped smiling ever since he received the news that his father Frank Mitchell had been martyred in Normandy. The little boy's brown hair was disheveled, his blue eyes were always red, and clothes always seemed too big on him. Tommy's favorite thing was the sound of trains. Samuel had specially prepared a train set for Tommy, a perfect set with a locomotive, wagons, and even a small station. The second child was 6-year-old Mary Sullivan. Mary had been constantly playing with her doll ever since. She received the news that her father Patrick had gone missing on an island in the Pacific. This little girl with black hair and green eyes no longer played with other children and was constantly hiding behind her mother's skirts. Samuel had specially made a small wooden dollhouse for Mary, with miniature furniture, curtains, and even a small doll inside. The third child was 9-year-old Billy Peterson. Billy was angry. Unlike the other children, after receiving the news of his father David's death, he had trouble going to school and was constantly getting into fights. Billy was thin for his height, blonde-haired, and had a freckled face. The anger he felt towards his father's absence burned in his eyes. Samuel had prepared a special project for what he thought would calm Billy's anger, a perfect replica of the ship his father had fought on. Samuel was observing these children because he understood their pain. His own son Michael had been captured on the Bataan Peninsula in the first years of the war and had never returned. Michael was Samuel's only child and his everything. 24-year-old Michael had grown up in Samuel's workshop and had learned woodworking from him. Tall, handsome, with brown hair and his father's eyes, Michael was only 22 when he went to war. After receiving the news that Michael was missing, Samuel did not go down to his workshop for months. His wife Ruth saw that her husband was withdrawing into himself. Ruth was a short, plump woman who always smiled. Her gray hair was always tied up, and her blue eyes were always full of love. But after losing her son, Ruth had also changed. She no longer smiled as much as before and constantly cried while looking at Michael's photographs at home. One night, Samuel went down to the workshop and looked at the project Michael had left unfinished. He was trying to make a small wooden ship. Samuel took those wooden pieces that his son's hands had touched and began to cry. That night, Samuel made a decision. If he could never make toys for his own son again, at least he could make them for other children who had lost their fathers. Samuel's secret project was something that no one in the town knew about. Every Monday evening, Samuel would put his toys in a bag and walk around the town. He would leave toys at the doors of children's houses and return without anyone seeing him. He never wrote a name next to the toys. He just left a small note. "Let your love for your father continue to live in this toy." He remembered the first night he left a toy at Tommy Mitchell's house. It was snowing, and the cold wind was hitting Samuel's face. Tommy's house was a small and modest wooden house on the edge of town. When Samuel left the train set at the door, he heard Tommy's voice from inside the house. "Mom, when will Daddy come?" The hopeless voice of the little child had broken Samuel's heart. The next morning, Samuel watched from his house window as Tommy found his toy. When the little boy saw the train set, that smile we had not seen for a long time appeared on his face. Tommy arranged the trains and moved them with the sounds he made. He ran to his mother. "Mom, look! Daddy sent me a train." Mother Margaret Mitchell was 32 years old, aged early by the hardships of war, with brown hair and sad eyes. When she saw her son's joy, a smile appeared on her face that she had not seen for months. Samuel would get up early every morning to watch these moments because he wanted to see the moments when children found their toys. The day Mary Sullivan found her dollhouse, the little girl was so happy that she started talking to the toy. "Hello, little baby. I will be your mother. My daddy is not here now, but don't worry. I will take care of you." Mary's mother, Catherine Sullivan, was a red-haired, freckled woman with tired eyes. After losing her husband, she had started working at the factory, and when she came home tired in the evenings, seeing her daughter playing with the toy gave her hope. Catherine sometimes asked her neighbors, "I wonder who makes these toys?" But nobody knew. One of Samuel's most difficult moments was the day he left the ship toy for Billy Peterson. Billy's house was a larger house in the center of town. But Billy's anger was poisoning the atmosphere in the house. His mother, Linda Peterson, was a blonde-haired, blue-eyed woman who always looked worried. Billy was constantly fighting and did not want to go to school. When Samuel left the ship at the door, he heard Billy's screams from inside. "My dad is dead. Nothing can bring him back." But when he found the ship in the morning, Billy suddenly became quiet. He took the ship in his hands, examined its details, and asked his mother, "Is this Daddy's ship?" Linda wondered where her son had found such a detailed ship toy. From that day on, Billy began to change. He played with the ship, imagined the places his father had fought, and was no longer as angry as before. He always carried the ship with him and put it next to his bed at night. When Samuel saw Billy coming home from school with the ship tucked under his arm, he understood how meaningful what he was doing was. As months passed, Samuel's project grew. As more children in the town lost their fathers, Samuel began making more toys. He prepared something special for each child. A baseball for some, a wooden car for some, a toy doll for some. Samuel designed his toys, considering each child's personality and needs. Rumors about this mysterious toy maker began to circulate among the children. They called him the Angel Man. Children asked each other, "Did you get a toy from the Angel Man too?" This question actually meant, "Did you lose your father too?" Children shared their own pain in this way. Samuel's wife Ruth saw that her husband went down to the workshop every evening but did not know exactly what he was doing. Ruth sometimes called down to the workshop from the stairs, "Samuel, dinner is ready." But Samuel was so absorbed that sometimes he did not hear her voice. Ruth understood that her husband's devotion to work in this way was trying to ease the pain of Michael's loss. One evening, Ruth decided to go down to the workshop. She slowly went down the stairs and found Samuel working with a wooden doll. Samuel was so concentrated that he did not notice his wife's arrival. Ruth saw the toys her husband had made and was amazed at how perfect they were. But when she examined the shelves more carefully, she understood that these were made for a very different purpose. "Samuel," Ruth said softly, "what are these for?" Samuel looked up and saw the curiosity in his wife's eyes. After remaining silent for a long time, he told the whole story. The pain of losing Michael, the situation of the children in the town, leaving toys at night, everything. Ruth's eyes filled with tears as she listened to what her husband told her. "Why didn't you tell me?" Ruth asked. "Because I knew this was my way of dealing with my own pain. I can never make toys for Michael again, but I can make them for children who are fatherless like him." Ruth held her husband's hands and said, "I can help too." From that night on, Ruth also joined Samuel's project. She sewed small clothes for toys, prepared hair for toy dolls, and prepared materials to make Samuel's work easier. As the project grew, Samuel and Ruth's marriage also strengthened. Sharing their pain and helping others helped them cope with their own losses. Samuel was no longer just focusing on Michael's absence. He believed he could still find meaning in his life. In the third year of the war, a special guest came to the town. War correspondent James Parker had come to Millfield to research the effects of war in small towns. James was 35 years old, tall, dark-haired, and always had a notebook with him. While touring the town, he noticed how high quality the toys the children were playing with were. When James started talking to the townspeople, he heard the story of the Angel Man. Children excitedly showed him their toys. "Tommy Michael showing his train set," said, "My daddy sent it to me." Mary Sullivan showing her dollhouse said, "My daddy sent it from heaven." James understood that this was not just the children's imagination, but that someone mysterious was really making these toys. James began to investigate the story. He talked to the adults in the town, examined the toys, and finally reached Samuel's identity. But when he found Samuel, he wanted to hear the man's story. James listened to the old man's story while sitting in Samuel's workshop. "Why do you do this?" James asked it. "Ask it." Samuel remained silent for a long time and then answered, "Because pain decreases when it is shared. He lost my son, these children lost their fathers. I cannot completely take away their pain, but I can at least give them some joy." James said he wanted to publish this story in his newspaper, but Samuel refused. "This is my way of dealing with my own pain. I don't want to be famous. I just want to help children." James respected Samuel's wishes, but could not forget the story. After the war ended, he came to the town again. What he saw then affected him greatly. The children had grown up, some had started school, and some no longer needed Samuel's toys. But they still kept their toys. Tommy Mitchell was now 10 years old and still kept his train toy in his room. He told his mother, "I will never throw away this toy because this is my daddy's last gift to me." Mary Sullivan was 9 years old and still carefully kept her dollhouse. Billy Peterson was 12 years old and still carried his ship with him. When Samuel reached the age of 66, he began to have health problems. His hands were no longer as willing as before, and his eyes had also weakened. But he was still working in his workshop because there were still children in the town who had lost their fathers. When the war ended, Samuel had made a total of 78 toys. When Ruth saw that her husband's condition was getting worse, she thought that his story should not be lost. She talked to other women in the town, and when they heard what Samuel had done, they were very affected. Together they decided to erect a monument in Samuel's memory. Samuel died in 1947, at the age of 70. All the residents of the town came to his funeral, but what was most striking was that the now-grown children brought their toys with them at the funeral ceremony. Tommy brought his train set, Mary brought her dollhouse, Billy brought his ship. For them, these toys were not just toys, but sacred objects that kept their father's memories alive. At the funeral ceremony, the town's priest spoke about Samuel. Samuel Thompson was a quiet hero. He used his own pain to ease the pain of others. The toys he made were not just pieces of wood, but symbols of love and hope. After the funeral ceremony, the townspeople decided to turn Samuel's workshop into a museum. All the tools in the workshop, unfinished projects, and Samuel's notes were preserved. The following inscription was hung at the entrance of the museum: "Love is stronger than wood. Hope is more permanent than pain." Over the years, Samuel's story spread to different parts of the United States. Families who lost their children during the war years were inspired by Samuel's story. Some started similar projects. Others made donations in Samuel's memory. Tommy Mitchell became an engineer when he grew up and worked in the train industry. He still kept the train set Samuel had made for him and told his own children about Samuel's story. Mary Sullivan became a teacher and worked with preschool children. She still kept her dollhouse in her room. Billy Peterson became a sailor and took the ship Samuel had made for him on every voyage. These three children came together in the 1970s and established a foundation in Samuel's memory. The foundation's purpose was to help children who lost their parents in wars. The foundation's logo contained 3 symbols representing the toys Samuel had made: a train, a dollhouse, and a ship. James Parker, when he retired, turned Samuel's story into a book. The book was titled The Toymaker's Secret. The book received great attention in the United States, and many people were affected by Samuel's story. James donated the book's proceeds to the foundation established in Samuel's memory. Samuel's wife Ruth died 10 years after her husband in 1957. Before she died, she completed Samuel's last toy, a small wooden heart. On this heart was written, "Love never dies." Ruth placed this heart next to Samuel's grave. Today, the Samuel Thompson Museum in Millfield is still open. Thousands of people visit this museum every year. In the museum, copies of the toys Samuel made are displayed. Visitors see Samuel's workshop in its original state. The smell of wood, old tools, and Michael's photographs hanging on the walls. The most visited section of the museum is Samuel's letter desk. On this desk are copies of the notes Samuel left for children. Each note was written for a different child. "Let your love for your father continue to live in this toy." This simple sentence has touched the lives of hundreds of children over the years. Samuel's story is not just about making toys. This story shows how pain can be transformed into love, how losses can be made meaningful. When Samuel lost his own son, instead of burying this pain within himself, he used it to help other children. During the war years, millions of families in the United States experienced the pain that Samuel experienced. But Samuel's story is special because he used his pain to help others. The toys he made were not just pieces of wood, but symbols of hope, love, and human resilience. Samuel Thompson's story teaches us how pain can be transformed into strength. Sometimes the greatest heroes are the quietest ones. Sometimes the most meaningful gifts are the simplest ones. And sometimes a toy is enough to heal a child's broken heart. This story, even 70 years after Samuel's death, continues to affect people. Because love is truly stronger than wood and hope is more permanent than pain.